Special Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, November 5th, 2018. Regrets from Councillor Maloney, Councillor Brennan, and Councillor Quinn. Do we have any amendments to the agenda? Nope. Okay. Disclosure of monetary interests? Don't see any. Delegations, none. Adoption of minutes? None due to the nature of the meeting. CAO and directors' reports?
No.
Nope.
None tonight.
Okay. Correspondence item, none. In-camera items, none. Priority issues. A is a exemption to the procurement bylaw outdoor fitness equipment for Lower Reach Park with Mr. Manhire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's the fastest I've ever been called up here. Just pulling up the report. Give me a second.
Maybe we should do is move E up as well. So we let the group deal.
Get rid of them?
Move them up earlier after our finish, maybe.
Okay. Move it up to, okay, yeah, okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, my technology is failing me here. Do you have a copy? I'll count on the media. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So what we're looking for here is an exemption to the procurement bylaw, and it's not, what it is that our procurement bylaw currently allows for tenders. It is under review at this point, and part of our priorities to get a new bylaw. What we're looking for here is the authority from council to put out an RFP, or a request for proposals. And the reason for that is because our equipment that we're looking to purchase is not, we can't specify specifically what we're looking to buy. So what we're doing in this case is the same as we're doing for instance, the pedestrian bridges, where we're looking to survey the market to find what's available and what the price tag is on those pieces, and then make a decision based on the most economical solution with the right fit for the product. So this is for the outdoor fitness equipment at Lower Reach. It was a project that was established for this year, and we did get a chance to go and take a look at some of the product selection that is available at a trade show through Parks and Recreation Ontario. Identified a number of different suppliers who can provide product that would be suitable for us, but they're all different, and so the RFP process is a better process to find the best solution for this fit.
Councillor Allen, do you have a question?
Yeah, pardon my voice, I've got it cold. The items that used to be there followed one of the school programs, Participation, I believe it was, and it was around for probably 15 years or longer. And I think when Councillor Maloney was involved in all of this, we were at FCM a couple of times, and we found manufacturers that kind of make those types of equipment. So that's what you're looking at.
That's correct. Yeah, the participation circuit is there's two different options. One is a circuit where you walk along a trail, and there's a circuit every couple hundred meters. Those participation pieces were put out actually in the 70s, made of wood, and so we ended up, they'd lived their useful life and we had taken those down. So this is a replacement for that, but we're not looking at a circuit necessarily. We're looking at a stationary block where you would have a number of different options within that one, on that one pad.
Oh,
Councillor Cumming?
Yeah, so thanks very much for the report. I get it. While you're asking for the exemption, I think I understand it. Just because of the very nature of what you're going to do. So I've got no problem with providing that. You did say in your report that you're going to bring back the equipment that you select, you're going to bring back to a future council just for final approval. So I think that fits with what we've been trying to accomplish. You know, to Councillor Allen's point, I mean, the participation actually was an initiative that the Kinsmen had done. The local Kinsmen had built that park in Lower Reach, that circuit park. It certainly outlived its usefulness, and it was getting dangerous, so that's why we had to take it down. But I know that there's a number of parks in Toronto that have this type of outdoor equipment, and I was walking along the lakeshore yesterday, actually, using a little bit of it right along Lake Ontario, and so these are the things that I know that you've already picked out. So I think they'll be a perfect addition to Lower Reach.
Thank you.
Mayor Banko?
Do you have a spot in Lower Reach that you plan to put it?
We have scoped out a couple of spots. We had a couple of manufacturers come to town to help us take a look at what spaces we had available or were possibilities, and selected a couple of those spots. And our primary spot is actually between the tennis courts and the beach volleyball court in that area near the playground.
And you said it'd be on a concrete?
Be on a concrete pad.
Okay.
And that presents some issues as well, just because of the former use at Lower Reach. So.
And that's not part of the RFP that we held done separately?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. There's two phases for this project, and one is going to be just the provision of a pad, depending on the equipment that we choose, what size that pad is going to be. That would be a separate contract. We pour a concrete pad, reinforced concrete, and then this equipment would be mounted on top of that concrete pad.
Okay. And are you providing some degree of I guess, specification as to what you're looking for within the RFP, or is it going to be pretty broadly based? Let them propose the types of equipment?
What we'll probably do is recommend a circuit of equipment. So the idea of equipment is that it generally will do different muscle groups in the body, and so you want to get a good mix of muscle groups. So you have a circuit that goes from legs and lower body to arms and upper body, usually consists of about 12 pieces, and then we would also have some skills pieces as well. So how far we get down that road is going to depend on the cost of the product individually, and they vary significantly. In our survey initially, units go from $1,500 up to $8,000 each. So it all depends on what we choose.
And will there be room for expansion at some point in the future?
That would ideally be the plan. I mean, ideally we get everything done now, but the idea is that if it doesn't fit our purse string, we can always kind of pare that back and do more later.
And one final question, this stuff remains in place, I assume year-round then?
That's correct. Yeah. And there's two different types, just not to get into too much detail, but there's static and which means that the pieces don't move, and then there's dynamic where the pieces will move, and they have hydraulics that generally provide resistance.
Okay. I support the staff recommendation.
Everybody's agreeable? Yeah. Okay. Guess we have a nodding of heads. Chris, the question I had was the same one as Chris, to make sure it comes back to council for approval before we purchase it, that's all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. We're going to go with B, Animal Rescue Planning Consideration Report 2018-157 with Our planner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm bringing a report to follow up from a discussion held at a previous meeting in October. So as council will recall, we had a delegation from Jill Woods, the owner of 45 Beach Street, and also the Feathered Haven Parrot Rescue, which is operating at that location. So in response to concerns that were raised, the town bylaw enforcement officers had a look at the property, and upon investigation, we noted that there were violation of 3 municipal bylaws: the animal control, the noise bylaw, and the zoning bylaw. So Ms. Woods approached council looking for relief from these bylaw requirements, and council had asked staff to undertake some research into the overall land use and bylaw components that we're looking at. So certainly to emphasize to council, at this point, we recognize the value of the work that's being undertaken here, and certainly it's a technical exercise here. Strictly speaking, does it the question that was proposed to us, does what's happening here comply with our bylaws? So there are a number of options depending on how the proponent wishes to proceed. So I'll start with the overall, with respect to planning. Our official plan is, of course, the guiding policy document that outlines how we want to see land uses evolve within the town, and the property is designated residential, and the official plan does contemplate non-residential uses within the residential designation, so long as they're so long as they're compatible and serving the day-to-day needs of the local residents. So certainly if a zoning amendment application were to be undertaken, then that's the overall policy context that the council would need to look at. So getting into the regulatory zoning bylaw, we do have a section that's keeping of animals that stipulates no animals other than household pets shall be kept in any zone except as permitted in animal care or animal clinic use in those zones in which animal clinic and kennel uses are permitted. So animal care is described in their zoning bylaw as a building or part of a building used by veterinarians, their staff, and their patients to provide grooming, medical, or surgical treatments or similar services, and includes overnight accommodation. So it's a fairly broad, the definition's fairly broad in scope, and it covers some services, of course, not provided by Ms. Woods, but it broadly captures the care element of our operation, and is the closest definition that fits with what we have. So the use doesn't comply with doesn't conform to the R1 zone requirements there. So animal care is identified as a permitted use in a couple of the commercial zones we have. So certainly we recognize this isn't commercial in the sense that we understand that profit isn't being derived from here, but the function of the land, we look at overall impacts as well. So I think if we're looking at this from a zoning perspective, there's a couple of options that could be followed here. One's a site-specific amendment where the proponent applies to the town to rezone her property and her property only, and it doesn't need to be rezoned to commercial, but rezoned to, say, a residential special exception, whereby animal care, or a definition that we create, is the additional permitted use. So a site-specific application, of course, would look at the site-specific attributes. There is a public consultation process, and we would be inviting feedback from any abutting property owners and agencies. So we're looking at usually a 3 to 4 month process for zoning, and a lot of that covers our statutory timelines that we have to follow under the Planning Act. So another option, and certainly if Ms. Woods wishes to proceed this way, she can work on the application as she would look to. But one option she could also consider is a temporary use provision where the use is considered for a period of up to 3 years, sort of as a trial period. So again, that's another option that the Planning Act allows council to consider. Alternatively, we could look at a comprehensive amendment, and if that's the case, then council could direct staff to look at creating either a definition or bylaw provisions to accommodate animal rescue. And when our clerk had circulated our neighbors and other municipalities throughout Ontario to see if anyone else has treated these, has looked at requests such as this, there's not a lot of others, and certainly from what we can tell, most of the others handle such a use very similar to how we do. So we weren't able to find an example of an animal rescue provision in a residential zone. So certainly zoning is an important thing to consider if council would like to accommodate this use. So if we're looking at if we have a zoning amendment application, then there's obviously a number of planning compatibility concerns that council would look at. Noise, potential health risks, traffic and parking, visual impact, storage and disposal of wastes, and normally through the process the proponent would demonstrate to us how these items can be addressed and accommodated. So in addition to zoning, of course, which regulates land use throughout the town, if we were to approve the zoning here, we would also be looking at either exceptions or amendments to the noise bylaw and the animal control bylaw. So those are two separate bylaws that apply here, and the current operation has been found to not be in conformity with it. So either way, I think in this case, if an animal rescue operation were to be permitted at this location or in any other residential use, municipal bylaws would need to be amended, and the onus would be on the applicant to initiate that process, firstly with zoning and then later with the other bylaws as may be required. So certainly, like any other zoning, there's a legislative process we need to follow, no guaranteed outcome. And I think at this particular stage in looking at it, we are sort of looking at a technical question about whether or not whether it complies, and then what are the next steps that would need to follow if we were to approve it there on a permanent basis, or not some time to finalize an application or to advise the town on how she would like to proceed.
Any questions?
No. Is that okay? And are you looking for a decision from council tonight, Carl, or is that what you're looking for, direction from us?
Well, I think at this perspective, looking for direction on how we proceed with enforcing our bylaw, or do we proceed with enforcing the provisions that we're looking at?
So I'm going to just give you my opinion. I'm a little uncomfortable with making the decision when we've got a lame duck council, and we've got only 2 members of council that are going to be here to deal with this in a later state. But certainly understand it's been before council, and there's an immediate or perceived immediate need to deal with this. So I'll give you my opinion, but again, I'm not sure about a decision. So based on the report that you provided and the information that we received previously, I think a compromise for a site-specific amendment, and maybe that needs to be defined as a rescue specifically. That should be something that should be we should ask the proponent to move forward with. As far as the animal control issue, I was here when we initially created that, and there was a lot of thought that went into that bylaw. It was amended from previous bylaws, and I thought it was a good bylaw at the time. But certainly we didn't understand, and that's what the whole idea is. Every once in a while, we have to examine what we've got and see if there's an exception. So the only compromise I had with that one would be maybe for animal control, we could look at that bylaw to augment that bylaw by creating a provision where someone could apply for a special license for a rescue, and that would fit under that bylaw without having to change it dramatically. So I would ask staff to review that option. The noise one, I can't get my head around, so I'm sure everybody that owns a home in Smiths Falls absolutely deserves the right for the quiet enjoyment of their own private property. But I do know there's obviously some concerns, and there have been some complaints. I don't live in that neighborhood. They're 24/7. I would probably hear something with that many number of birds. So that one I don't have a compromise to, or even a thought on, but those are my opinions at this point.
Mayor Pankel?
Largely agree with Councillor Cummings on this. I mean, I think his last comment is very valid. Someone has the right to the enjoyment of their property, whether they own or rent or whatever there. So it's a matter of making sure that no one is, a neighbor does not impact someone's enjoyment of their own property. Now, that said, I think we recognize the value that Jill is bringing to the community and to the birds, and I want to commend that they're all pretty well behaved tonight. Wasn't sure how they would be up here, but they're doing a good job. I think it really comes back to I guess Jill working with staff to determine the best path forward, and I would also agree that really that site-specific zoning is probably the direction to go, or as an interim, if you had plans on eventually moving, then it would be a matter of doing something on an interim solution. I don't have an interest, obviously, in causing you any grief today, and we want to make sure you have some time to make a decision and determine your best path forward. A factor, I wouldn't think, and like Councillor Cummings said,
I do